Hey guys, it's Victoria and welcome back to FemmeHead. Today we're going to talk about postpartum periods, charting your cycle after having a baby, pelvic floor physical therapy after having a baby, and trying to wear a menstrual cup after having a baby. And sweet little Lincoln Rell's gonna sit here next to us and just be a little cutie because he's choosing not to nap right now. So if you hear any baby noises, he's literally right here on the floor. Let's talk about checking your fluid postpartum. As you probably know, you have some postpartum bleeding after giving birth, regardless of whether you have a vaginal birth or a C-section birth. I learned that. I did not know, which it makes total sense now, that even if you have a C-section, you still have like postpartum bleeding. The average, the norm is about 6 weeks. And I would say that was pretty true with both boys. Just like when you're on your period, you don't chart your fluid because you can't really accurately chart it when you have menstrual blood or lochia, postpartum bleeding, all that sort of stuff. So just don't worry about charting your fluid until after your postpartum bleeding ends. And then once it ends, you can start paying attention to it. And your cervical fluid is the greatest indicator of your fertility returning. Ideally, you want to check your fluid a couple times throughout the day. And the best habit to get into is before you go to the bathroom, just check your fluid real quick. And you want to be as consistent as you can be. And whatever the most fertile fluid is you see throughout the day is the fluid that you go with for that particular day. Talking about temperature. Taking your temperature postpartum is much more difficult than checking your fluid. As you can imagine, or if you've had a baby, you know that you don't get consistent sleep for several weeks, months, or years. So trying to find a time to take your temperature isn't as easy as it was like pre-baby when you're getting 8 hours of whatever sleep. So what you want to do is you want to find a chunk of time where you've had 3 to 4 solid hours of sleep, not your baby sleeping 3 or 4 hours, you getting 3 or 4 hours of solid like sleep, and that's when you want to take your temperature. So that might be 2 a.m. That might be 4 a.m., that might be 8 a.m., whenever that is. So you actually have to keep track of when you last went to sleep and how long it has been since that point. So you kind of have to, when the baby starts moving and fussing, you have to take a look at your clock and decide if you've been asleep long enough to take your temperature. And if you had, pop in your thermometer and take your temperature really quick before tending to your baby. Ask your partner to hop out of bed and go change the diaper. Take care of the baby for 60 seconds while you take your temperature. Right before I had Lincoln, I purchased the temp drop because I wanted to test it out because I get asked all the time about it. I just wanted to try it out postpartum with him, and I have really enjoyed it. So I think I started using it around 6 weeks postpartum, and he is almost 6 months old. Once you get into the habit of just like popping out on your arm every night, it is so much easier than like having to do that middle of the night math of like, have I been asleep long enough? Should I take my temperature? You just put it on before you go to bed, take it off when you get up in the morning, and then every couple days I just sync it to my phone, and then I take my temperatures from the Temp Drop app and put them into my Kandara app. That's where I do all of my charting. So far I had my long postpartum no period phase, and then I've had 2 actual cycles since then, 3 periods total. So my first postpartum cycle was 23 days, so it's pretty short. My period came and I was like, what the heck? But this last cycle was 30 days, so I'm like, okay, that's a bit more in the range of what we want. But it is pretty common and normal to have really short luteal phases after your postpartum phase, and so it's really just your hormones balancing back out. Talking about periods and period products, I noticed like the length of my period is about the same as it was before having kids, but I would say it's definitely heavier on certain days, and the cramps are different. So I used to get like a lot of back cramps on my periods, but now the majority of the cramps that I like notice and feel are like pelvic floor cramps. That's the best way to describe it. So I'm able to use period underwear on the lighter flow days, but then I have to like take it up a notch and use pads, which isn't my favorite, but I'm doing pelvic floor physical therapy to get my body back to a place where I can use my cup again, because that's my favorite combo is menstrual cup and period underwear, and that's my goal to get back to. So I tested out my cup this last period for the first time since like postpartum with Theo, when I realized I couldn't use a cup, and it's better. It's not quite back to where I can use a cup yet. Like I've got a little bit more work to do, but we're getting there. So like I said, I've been doing pelvic floor physical therapy for about 2 months now. I went because I knew I couldn't use a cup and I really wanted to. I didn't even try after having Lincoln because I was like, I couldn't after having Theo, and there's no way that like having a second child has somehow healed my pelvic floor. I know it just made the problems worse. So I was like, we're gonna go do some work and then we'll try it out. So I tried it out this last period. I did some finagling with my cup to try to like make it more comfortable. So pre-babies, I needed all the stem there was. My cups would sit really high, but postpartum, especially this last time, the stem was just like jabbing into like bottom portion of my vagina slash probably like labia, and it was just like irritating it and uncomfortable. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to snip the stem. And so I did that, and then I remembered the flipping your cup inside out trick, which I wish I would have just done instead of trimming my stem, because maybe I'll need that stem once I get my, anyways, it doesn't matter, I can buy another cup. So I trimmed the stem off and then I flipped the cup inside out, and that made it a lot more comfortable, but I could still tell that it wasn't like sitting in me correctly. It was kind of like protruding, poking out at the bottom of me, out of my vagina, and I was like, that doesn't really work. So I just took it out and I was like, okay, improvements in like the pelvic floor, vagina area, wearing a cup area, but we're still not quite there. The other issue I went to physical therapy for after having Sweet Lincoln was, it's called anal incontinence, which is like accurate, but also just the name of it, you're like, oh, just a little touch of anal incontinence. So basically, TMI, if you're like talking about poop, skip ahead. That's also a pelvic floor issue for some women. Like you hear about moms like peeing themselves when they sneeze or when they laugh or when they like jump or whatever. Like I didn't have that issue, but for me, after having Lincoln, after I would have a bowel movement, I would say like 75-80% of the time, after I would go to the bathroom, I'd go about my day, and the next time I go to the bathroom to like pee or whatever, there would just be like the smallest amounts of poop in my underwear. Like skid marks, and you're like, that's embarrassing, that I don't want that. And so I would say that even more than like not being able to wear a cup. I was like, yeah, my pelvic floor needs some work. I'm gonna go get some help with this. Like I'm not gonna settle for like shitting myself a little bit every time I go to the bathroom. Like that's not cool. So I've been working on that in physical therapy, and that has seen a lot of improvement, like noticeable improvement. Like the rate at which I have that is slim to nil. It's much more of a rare occurrence now, so that like motivates me even more to continue working on my exercises they've given me, to check back in with them and all that good stuff. So physical therapy works. It just takes some time. It's not like an overnight fix. So far my cycles have been going well, my charting has been going well, pelvic floor is improving, all like period related things are getting better. I feel like I am in the minority when people get their periods back postpartum. I noticed for me with both boys, it was when they started doing like a longer stretch at night. So like 4 hours or more, which isn't that long of a stretch. But when they started doing a longer stretch instead of being up every like 2 to 3 hours to eat is when it was about a month out from that I noticed my period would come back. So with Theo, I got my first period 10 weeks postpartum, and with Lincoln, I got my first period 16 weeks postpartum. I'm actually fine with getting my period back and my cycle back sooner, because obviously that makes it easier to like chart and all that sort of stuff. The one thing I'll say about physical therapy, find someone who specializes in pelvic floor physical therapy. And I have noticed a huge difference between like going there versus the one time I went to PT when I was pregnant with Lincoln. Like going to PT when I was pregnant with Lincoln solved the issue that I was having then, but this is definitely like a whole picture approach of like talking about, you know, pelvic floor health and strength, and that how that's connected to like core strength, talking about like back and shoulder like pain and discomfort and like tenseness. Like I carry so much stress in my like shoulders, neck, and jaw, and just like when you're hunched over like breastfeeding, carrying kids around, you gotta learn to go back like this, and physical therapy has helped with that. So I highly recommend, if you have any sort of inkling or even just to get like checked out after having a baby, go find yourself a physical therapist. Like it should be routine. I feel like you should go and have your 6-week postpartum checkup and then go to your physical therapy. Anyways, me and Lincoln are gonna hang out and chill. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. That's my little update, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.